Hey everyone, welcome to Shimmy Stamina 1. I wanted to make a quick video just about the terminology that I'll be using and some of the key principles that I think are important for any type of shimmy. And I'll tell you the vocabulary and then I'll demonstrate it for you, okay? So first of all is posture and dance posture. So I'll show you what that means to me and how understanding your posture can affect what happens in your shimmy. The second thing is timing. And what I mean by that, and you'll hear me say keeping even timing, which just means that from one side to the other, whether that's coming from your legs or coming from your rib cage or coming from your shoulders, all shimmies rely on a balance or an evenness. So even though we are symmetrical in appearance most of the time, we are not necessarily symmetrical from one side to the other, right? We all have a dominant side. And shimmy is a great way of tuning into the imbalances or those strengths and weaknesses and really cultivating a more balanced from one side to the other body. The types of shimmy that I'll explain are a hip shimmy, a knee shimmy, an oblique shimmy, a choo-choo or a tiptoe shimmy, and a three-quarter shimmy. The names of these shimmies are not necessarily important. And sometimes just describing them a different way can make the shimmy have a different texture. So that's true for all movements, right? So if we call something a wave, that is going to have elicit different imagery for one person, for you perhaps, or your friends, or, you know, just when I say wave to you, what it means to your friend may not be the same thing. When I say wave, what it conjures up for me is the ocean. And so for me, that makes me relaxed when I think about the ocean. That may not be true for other people, right? So something like a wave might give that, by using that terminology, might give that movement a certain quality that calling it something else may not. So taking wave, for example, if we called that, maybe if we called it a sway, maybe that turns it into something else, right? So I tend to use vocabulary for movements that tell you where I want you to drive the movement from, but I may use words to try to elicit different emotional responses or different somatic responses so that you can explore kind of what you want to do within the framework of the shimmy. Okay, so speaking of posture, dance posture, I'm always going to ask for you to have your knees unlocked. Now, when I say unlocked, that doesn't necessarily mean very bent. It just means that we want to have some play in the knees. And even if we're not using the knees as what's driving our shimmy, if the knees are locked out, then the hips are not really going anywhere but forward, right? Which is useful in a twisting shimmy, I realize. So in that case, I'll tell you, you know, when we need the knees to be locked, but 90% of the time, we want the knees to be unlocked. So get used to what that feels like. Now, here are the hinges in our posture that we want to be aware of and that we can also play with. The first is in the hips or in the pelvis and that forward and back movement that it can do. Okay, so if my knees are equally unlocked, then my pelvis can rock forward and back. The pubic bone and the bony parts of the hips make a triangle in the front of the body, in the front of the belly, really. And from there, we can imagine that it's untucking or tucking, right? And we want to find that place. This is going to be completely up to your own felt sense. Find that place where that triangle is perpendicular to the floor, right? So A mirror is not always going to tell you this. I don't want you to look back here for that information, because we have a lot of flesh back here. Well, we have a lot of flesh everywhere, but oftentimes the roundness of our backside gets in the way of where we think our tailbone is. I really would prefer that you think about that triangle that is happening in the front of your pelvis, okay? And then you're thinking of for most people, we have to think of pointing the pubic bone up, and that immediately engages the low belly. If when you think about pointing the pubic bone up, everything kind of crunches, that's okay for now. But pubic bone up, the glutes are relaxed. So just try that. Think about pubic bone up and see if you can keep the glutes pretty relaxed. They're going to participate a little bit, but I want you to really try to cultivate, separate the senses between what's happening in the front low belly and what's happening in the glutes, okay? So for the most part, we want those to stay pretty relaxed, because once we get going, we want all of that flesh to really be able to wobble. Okay, so once we've got our triangle perpendicular to the floor, then the rib cage we're looking at next, right? So for most of us who do not spend our life in dance posture, we have to think about lifting the rib cage up and out of the hips, and then dropping the shoulders down. Okay, it will probably feel like you're stretching out and creating traction in the spine. And we want to feel that way. Now, here are some things that tend to happen. When I start to think about moving the chest, oftentimes the hips also want to go, right? Because the spine tends to act all as one thing. So in raqs sharqi, we really are separating these things so that we can articulate them without the other. So we're isolating them and then playing around with those elements. So just check that out for yourself. If when you lifted the rib cage up and out of the hips, drop the shoulders down, did you lose your posture in your lower body? If you did, try to keep this here and see if you can point the tailbone up, soften the knees, right? And now close your eyes, take a breath in this posture, and try to remember it. Let your body remember this feeling, so that when I say come into dance posture from wherever you are, you can go, and here we are, okay? And this is a great thing to practice just when you're out in daily life. Being in this posture is a very healthy place to hold your body. It often alleviates a lot of low back pain because we're using the low abdominal muscles to relieve the back muscles. So we'll work on all kinds of shimmies that also will help strengthen those muscles. But to start, our posture is knees unlocked, pubic bone up, rib cage lifted, shoulders down, okay? Now, timing. Well, let's talk about a couple of the ways to shimmy. And for me, I really want everyone to find their home base shimmy. This is probably terminology I will use a lot. Home base shimmy, meaning that there is a way that you naturally want to shimmy. There just is. So just get one going and try to figure out, okay, what am I doing? What's anatomically happening, right? That's shaking my hips, okay? Now, that can come from a lot of places. The most common place is for it to come from the legs. Just by straightening and bending one knee and then the other. And on the bend is when that will drop that hip, right? On the straighten, it will lift that hip. So by changing how we think about if we're dropping versus if we're lifting, that will also influence kind of the texture of the shimmy, you could say, okay? So if we're going from the knees, then you're just aware that it's coming from the knees. You could also do it more from what we would say the hip, which are like the muscles of the glutes. This tends to be have a little bit more of a seat. I notice that my knees are not pumping as much. They're moving because I'm engaging the muscles around the glutes. I personally do a blend of the knee and the hip shimmy. So this is not to say that you have to focus on one. It's just a matter of understanding your own body and what you like to do, and then working out the timing so that it's even from one side to another. And we'll do lots of drills that focus on really being on one side, coming back and doing both, being on the other side, coming back and doing both, so that you can build evenness from one side to the other, okay? Same with like a rib cage shimmy. Everyone has a dominant side that tends to want push that one side, but we're going to focus on both going. When one goes forward, the other goes back, and vice versa. Yeah. So that's what I mean by evenness. Not just evenness in timing, but also evenness in effort or in pathway. The 3/4 shimmy. Just have to consult my notes. 3/4 shimmy is a common term used in belly dance around the world. It can refer to many different types of shimmies, and so I will give you the folkloric or the raqs sharqi names for them when they apply. But what is most important to know is just that there are 3 things happening in the space of 4. So if I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, I should say 1, 2, 3, 4, or rather 1, 2, 1, 2, there we go. I could go 1 E and 2 E and 1 E and 2 E and 1, 2, 3, 4, da 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 and da da da, nothing, 1, 2, 3, nothing, 1, 2, 3, nothing. Okay, so in this course I'm going to show you 4 different 3/4 shimmies. We'll use one each week along with your home-based shimmy and other shimmies that we're kind of cultivating throughout the course. But just when you hear me say 3/4 shimmy, you'll know that that's the one that we're using for the week. It's a great practice to go between all kinds of 3/4 shimmies into your home-based shimmy and out of it. In fact, this is kind of where most of the magic happens, is when we play with that timing. Yeah, I think that's all that I have to say for now about shimmies. I love to shimmy. I think that it's one of the most unique things about this dance, that we have it and that we have so many. And you know, you can be really creative with the things that you can shimmy. So have fun with it, and I will see you in the course.